right, so today we're going to bring World War I to an end. We've kind of been stuck here in this situation for a while now with France and Britain fighting Germany on the Western Front and Russia fighting Germany on the Eastern Front. Germany is stuck in this two-front war, which, are very hard. It's very hard to win a two-front war when you're having to fight people or armies on both sides of you. So let's bring this thing to an end. So Russia over here is going to go through a revolution. We call it the Russian Revolution, and we'll go into it more after spring break. But basically, you had the Romanov family had been in charge for 200-300 years at least, and many problems are going to lead to that family being forced to step down from power and give up their power. The main one was World War I, and Russia, losing so many men and so many battles, and just World War I was not very popular in Russia at all. So that's going to be the main reason the Romanov family steps down. Then they come up with a temporary government or a provisional government until they can come up with something more permanent. And the Romanovs, got Russia into World War I. Well, this temporary provisional government decides to keep Russia in World War I, and that was probably not a real popular decision at all. And as a result, this temporary government is going to be really temporary, because in less than a few months, they're going to be overthrown, this time by the Communist Party, led by a guy named Vladimir Lenin. So this is when Russia becomes communist. And so just to recap there, you had the Russian government was led by the Romanovs for a long time. Well, they're overthrown. They set up a temporary or a provisional government for a while, and they only last a few months, and then they're overthrown by Vladimir Lenin and the communists. And this is when Russia becomes communist. They will eventually change their name to the Soviet Union. So, like I said, we'll go into all that later. But Lenin now is in charge, and guess what he says about World War I? He says Russia is getting out. Okay? So this is something that the British and the French and the Americans did not want to happen. If Russia gets out of this war, look what Germany can do to its army. It can take all these soldiers and send them where? That's right. Now they can focus on France with all of their forces. Okay, and this is what Britain and France were worried about. And by Russia getting out of this war, that is now what Germany is able to do. This treaty where Russia gets out of World War I is called the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. I know that's kind of a weird word, Brest-Litovsk. So that is the treaty when Russia, who is now led by communists, decides to withdraw and get out of World War I. It's important because now Germany can focus all of its efforts on the Western Front. Okay, so if you remember early on in the war, Germany had invaded, that's Belgium up there, Germany had invaded and made it all the way down to the Marne River. And if they get past the Marne River, they take over Paris. And if you take over Paris, you defeat France, and the war would have been over very quickly. But in that first battle of the Marne, they start pushing the Germans back. And then the Germans end up digging trenches, and that starts the whole trench warfare. Well, now, towards the end of the war, now that Germany is focusing only on Britain and France again, now they make one final push, and guess where they make it back to again? They make it all the way back to that Marne River again. So there's going to be another battle. That first battle was called the First Battle of the Marne, and it was a huge victory for Britain and France. Now we're going to have the Second Battle of the Marne, and by this time you have American soldiers are showing up. So now you have American soldiers in the fight, British soldiers in the fight, American, British, and French soldiers, and it's like a boxer who Germany is like a boxer who goes for a knockout and just wastes all their energy eventually if you go for that knockout, you're going to wear yourself down. And that's what the German army was like now. It was worn down after 3 or 4 years of fighting a two-front war. Their army was just depleted and worn out and tired. So yeah, they made it all the way back to the Marne River. But now that Americans and French and British are all three fighting against the Germans, Germany is going to lose again. This time it's the second battle of the Marne. So two really important battles at the Marne. The first battle was in the very first part of the war. If Germany wins that, it probably would have led to a quick defeat of France and then a quick defeat of Russia, and World War I would have been over. But the Germans lost that one. It leads to trench warfare and a long, slow war. This is the second battle of the Marne at the end of the war, and it's kind of like a last desperate attempt from Germany to take Paris. And with American help, the British and French are going to win the second battle of the Marne. After this victory, Germany basically has no shot of winning. The Kaiser knows this. So the Kaiser actually steps down from power, abdicates his throne, gives up his throne, and just kind of runs away. Kind of starts this whole war, and then when it becomes obvious that he's going to lose, he runs away where he doesn't have to deal with all the repercussions, which means a new German government is going to have to be formed really quickly, and they're going to have to deal with all the mess. So the Kaiser starts the war. When it's obvious he loses, he runs away and leaves somebody else to take care of his mess. So that was unfortunate. But this new German government is going to have to be the ones who officially kind of surrender, and they're the ones who sign the armistice. That's a vocab word, armistice, which means an agreement to stop fighting. So a lot of people blame this. A lot of Germans blame this new government that they surrendered and they signed the armistice, but they really had no choice, and they're not even the ones who started the war. So really, they should have blamed their Kaiser. It's unfortunate that they got all the blame when they were just cleaning up after his mess. So after the second battle of the Marne, the Kaiser steps down. A new German government's created, and they're the ones that end up having to surrender to the British and the French. And they signed an armistice on November 9th. Let me get my dates right. November 9th is when the Kaiser stepped down. November 11th of 1918 is when the war officially comes to an end, and it's called Armistice Day. And we still celebrate this day around the world. November 11th is when we celebrate Veterans Day. So Veterans Day is every November 11th, and it's really celebrating not only veterans, but the end of World War I. All right. So World War I, just a few stats about World War I. 8.5 million soldiers died. Very, very deadly war. An estimated $338 billion were lost in this war. $338 billion. It cost the world $338 billion. And then farms were destroyed, homes were destroyed, villages, towns, just destroyed. So a very deadly war, a very expensive war, a very damaging war. But it has now come to an end. All right, I wanted to show you these two charts here in the textbook. On the left, you have a very simple, bar graph, which shows the number of troops mobilized. So that means like the number of troops on each side. The Allied powers, the good guys from our standpoint, would be Britain and France and America, as well as Russia and Italy and Japan. We had 42 million soldiers. And the Central Powers, the bad guys, Germany and Austria-Hungary, they only had 23 million troops. So we almost had twice as many soldiers on our side than they did. As far as battlefield deaths, you can see Germany has the most at 1.8 million. And that makes sense because they were fighting a two-front war. So it would make sense for them to have the most deaths. Russia comes in a close second. That also makes sense because I said Russia, they just suffered defeat after defeat after defeat. So they lost 1.7 million young men. And then you have France at 1.3 million, Austria at 1.2 million, the British at 908,000. And, America, we lost 116,000, which that is a tremendous number of deaths. That's not quite twice as many as Vietnam, but it's getting close to twice as many as we lost in Vietnam. But compared to everybody else in World War I, it looks like a tiny, tiny sliver compared to what everybody else lost. So that just kind of lets you know how deadly this war really was. Throughout world history, it's been called different names. The Great War, I think I've mentioned that a few times in these videos. Great is in big or large. It was also called the War to End All Wars. And now we call it World War I, and we didn't really start calling it that until after World War II. So, all right, well, that is how the Great War came to an end. The next thing we have to do, and it'll probably have to be after spring break, but we'll have to come back and talk about the peace treaty and the agreements made at the end of this war. And that peace treaty will become known as the Treaty of Versailles. So that'll be the next major topic. So hope you all have a wonderful spring break. I will not be making another video until after spring break. Hope you all enjoy your time off from digital learning. And we will see you when we get back. All right, take care. Bye.